Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. My name is Mars, and today we're going to be talking about CG Warrior of Light Bartz. Now, this is a unit that was pretty intensely hyped from the Japanese version of the game, but as you may have noticed as he arrived in Global, I guess fewer people were really that interested in him, and I suppose I can't really blame people because the Global version of the game does get so many awesome units. That being said, Bartz is still a character extremely worthy of note, so we're going to go over him, his rotation, and his builds, and kind of help you figure out whether or not he's worth investing for yourself. So before jumping into anything else, we're going to go ahead and take a look at his TMR and his STMR. His Trustmaster reward is the Hermes Sandals, which is basically the true dual-wield version of a Martial Glove or a Rush Glove. It is a true dual-wield accessory that grants 50% equipped attack when equipped with two weapons. So if you've been kind of sitting on the bench waiting out for an opportunity to do true dual wield shenanigans, his TMR is definitely one of the easiest to access in order to grant that. The only other accessories that grant true dual wield are Aloha Lastwells, which does 25%. And then CG Onion Knight in the future will also have that, but he's going to be harder to get than Bartz, and Ravenheart, which is an STMR for Malphase. So there are not a ton of options for this particular sort of thing, so this is a good way to get a hold of it. In fact, probably the best. Now, Bartz's STMR, it doesn't look that crazy. It's 167 attack, one-handed wind weapon, so it is very good. Obviously 167 attack is a lot, but it is mostly just incredibly good on himself because of course Bartz loves to do wind damage. It's a wind elemental weapon, and we'll get later into how it helps him a lot, but it is definitely an awesome item if you happen to get it, but definitely not one that you have to pull for. Now, Bartz's kit is quite large and has a lot of interesting stuff in it, but we're mostly going to focus on the stuff that matters the most to you. Of course, he can do stuff like boost LB fill rate and fill LB for himself. He can entrust, he can multicast, he can restore HP and MP. He can do, that's basically most of his support stuff, but you're going to ignore most of that, okay? And speaking of things you're going to ignore, we're going to go ahead and turn on limit burst animations. I've had them off while I'm farming the event. Hell yeah. His limit burst is super cool, but you will basically never use it, so here's your chance to watch it. It really is so very cool. It's a shame it's not part of his normal rotation, or I guess his most optimal damage per turn rotation. You can use it as part of a burst rotation, but overall most people are probably not going to use it. What you are going to use are the rest of the skills that we have down here. Bartz is very unique because he basically does 0 damage for the first 3 turns of the fight. He basically does nothing because he spends all of his time powering up. He's going to be using his gained a job level ability, and what this does is it buffs all of his stats, gives him modifier boosts to his damaging skills, and it unlocks for the following turn another level up. So let's take a compare and contrast. Right now he's at 3400 attack, which I think is auto boosted. Mine has like 3150 equipped right now. And then he's got 451 defense and 500 spirit. So when we activate that, he obviously gets some buffs. So 700 defense and spirit on turn 1, and then his attack buff was not overridden. I think he has auto attack buff or something like that. So that's cool. And what that ability does, so this stays here, but when you use it the first time, it unlocks gained a job level 3, and it basically does the same thing again, except stronger. So you would activate that again, and now you can see his attack went up to 3579, and his defense is 772, and his spirit is 854, which is, it's pretty freaking high for a damage dealer to have defense and spirit like that. But wait, it gets better, because as you can see, he can unlock it a 3rd time with permanent modifier boosts. And the best part about this, okay, a thing to note about these job level buffs, they cannot be dispelled and they last the entire fight. So literally the only thing that can erase them or remove them or reset things is if he dies. So and with the defensive stats that he has, he's probably not going to die, because let's take a look at him now. Once you've done it to the max level, mine has almost 1,000 spirit, almost 900 defense, and over 3,700 attack. So that is pretty flippin' outrageous. Bartz is not gonna die unless he takes like an auto death sort of mechanic or takes like unbroken boss attacks. That's about the only thing that is going to kill him. So that's pretty insane. That, I think, is one of Bartz's biggest selling points, is that he just sticks around. He has no Fs to give, especially if you get his story boss battle enhancements. He's got 2 of them. We'll touch on that real quick. His 2 that he has are actually really, really nice, unlike Lena's. I totally skip Lena's because Lena's are dumb. This one allows him to escape death when his HP is above 1%, so it's a guts passive, and it always activates, at almost any HP level. So this is actually super handy to have, especially against fights like Neo X Death, where the boss randomly nukes party members after like 20% HP. A lot of other damage dealers would risk dying, but Bartz is so innately tanky that he can eat a lot of those, and with his guts passive, he can just survive one that would normally kill him. Now, the other thing that he has is his Fragments of Inner Courage. This is also awesome. You do want to use this before you start exploding your opponents. It does buff your damage modifiers for all of your main damage abilities by 200% for 10,000 turns. So it never goes away, and it cannot be dispelled. So you keep this forever once you activate it. So those I highly recommend. If you're running a Bartz in your friends list, please get it. Please get it. It really sucks if you run into a Bartz in your friends list that does not use it. So that being said, we've had 3 turns of power up. This is where your rotation might differ a little bit. I'm running a Bartz with a wind elemental weapon, and I recommend everybody do the same. Luckily, Bartz's banner is running with I think a 4-star unit that has a Trustmaster reward that is a wind weapon. If you don't have Bartz's STMR, no big deal. Please pick up that sword. It is a huge part of helping his rotation be very, very simple, and the good news is most bosses don't resist wind damage. So anyways, if you have a wind weapon equipped, what you're going to do for this turn is you're going to use his story boss battle ability, which is Fragments of Inner Courage 2, and then you're going to use his Imperil ability, which is Sword Dance. And this is also his best non-cooldown damage skill. So you'll use these 2. This one will buff your modifiers, and then this one will imperil damage. Now, if you are running a friend unit that does not have this buff, or is not using a wind weapon, what you can do instead for that unit is do the same for your Bartz, do this cooldown, and do Sword Dance to imperil. And that Bartz friend can use his cooldown, and he can use his wind imbue. But you can skip the imbue. It's better for your turn economy if you skip wind imbue altogether and you just equip a wind weapon. But if you're working with a Bartz friend that's not doing that, then you can work around that. So what we want to do, most optimal rotation when you're using wind weapons for both Bartzes, is use the cooldown skill and then chain Sword Dance. So now you are fully buffed, you have full modifiers on all of your abilities, you are ready to explode your opponents. Because as you can see, we have still that crazy amount of attack. It's not going to be dispelled, it can't be dispelled, it doesn't go away. The only thing that makes you lose it is dying, so Bartz is ready to go. What you're going to do this turn is chain Dual Spellblade, and this unlocks Bartz's best ability. Brave Blade, FF5, is the strongest ability, and Dual Spellblade unlocks that for the following turn. So this is what you want to use on your 5th turn, so that you unlock your biggest burst window. Now, of course, if a boss mechanic is kind of forcing you to not be ready to go on your burst turn, like let's say we know that, there's a big dispel or a big whatever coming out soon, you can delay this cooldown that we use, Dual Spellblade, and you can just chain with Sword Dance instead. It still does reasonable damage, especially when you're buffed as high as Bartz is. Now, once you use Dual Spellblade, it's the next turn to shine. Brave Blade does a stupid amount of damage, and all of Bartz's skills are absolute Mirror of Equity, so you could use them with other AMOE chainers. But in this case, you definitely want to line this burst up with another Bartz, because it does stupid good damage. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that was almost 1 billion damage on a chaining skill with no chain partner. So that's kind of ridiculous. So that's basically your opening rotation. You don't have to do job levels anymore. You're fully buffed for the rest of the fight unless you die, so you can just leave that alone. And then, of course, the reason why you don't generally use his Limit Burst is because the modifier buffs for his abilities from this are not permanent. They do fall off after 3 player turns following using it, so not really worth using most of the time because your burst window is only so big anyways. But anyways, while you're waiting for Dual Spell Blade to come back up, what you want to do is just keep chaining with Dancer Sword Dance. That's going to be your best non-cooldown associated chaining ability. And then if you need to reapply Wind Imbues, you can totally do that. And that's about it on Bartz's rotation. You just maintain some of those chains, those imperils, those imbues. And then when Spellblade is up, you use that. And then you use, what's it called? Brave Blade. Yeah, so that's basically his essential rotation. Pretty simple to use, and ultimately I think it's very, very effective. So the next thing we want to talk about real quick is some builds, give you an idea of what to look forward to. Now with Bartz, there's a number of ways that you can build him. Yeah, he can equip all kinds of weapons. So honestly, he works with anybody at basically any level in the game. He's just an outstanding unit to build in general, also because he comes with an excellent TMR. So the first thing we want to look at, of course, is kind of a whaley build. And the nice thing about it is that it does prefer Longinus, which is the spear reward from the Lich trial. That's super handy. You'll notice with this build that, or with all the builds, you should equip a sword, and it should be a wind sword. In this case, it's Bartz's own STMR. If you don't have that, go ahead and use his own TMR, and then equip any wind sword after that. But you do want a wind sword, and Longinus is usually going to be your best secondhand weapon because there's not really anything out there that's better than 190 attack, especially for free. So that's really, really nice. Other than that, you're just going to make sure that he caps out on true dual wield, and you're going to increase his attack percentage after that, and you're going to save a slot for a killer and make sure his Esper is equipped with the appropriate killer. Other than that, you don't really have to do anything else crazy. He's not like Esther. You don't have to buff her limit burst damage with materials or anything. You just build him for attack and killers and a wind weapon, and that's about all there is to it. If you want a sample for a more budgety build, this just uses 5-star base TMRs and more common than that. So of course you have that TMR Wind Sword. It's 125 attack, which is really fantastic to pick up if you're using Bartz. You should always have that equipped unless you're going against a boss that resists or immunes wind. And of course Longinus again, because everybody has access to it. Precious Hairpin. Some other attack things. The nice thing about Bartz is if you have 7-star Bartz, you also have access to 2 of his own TMR, which will give you 200% true dual build, which is the cap. So that's super handy, easy to build. I mean, it comes with the stuff you need to make it happen. And then from there, it's the same sort of principle where you equip materials that give you, passive, or that give you, sword passives or just general passives. One thing you could do is if you have better great swords and you don't have Longinus yet, you could equip a great sword and use the great sword materia from the egg trial. There's just tons of options. That's the beautiful thing about Bartz, is basically you just want to activate his trust passive, cap him out on true dual wield, and then stuff as much attack stuff in him as possible. A couple of build things I will note. First of all, if you have weapons with killers that apply for whatever particular boss you're going up against, you always want to be sure you're using those. But in Global, I feel like we don't have too many of those weapons. Like, we definitely have spears with Dragon Killer, and Longinus, of course, has Spirit Killer, and there's stuff like that. But we don't have a ton of weapons for all types of enemies. But if one does apply, you do want to equip it instead of Longinus. Now, the other weapon I will talk about is Excalibur, which is coming out this week with the Castle of X-Death thing, or whatever, the exploration event associated with Bartz's banner. This is a unique weapon in that it has 1 attack, but it grants you damage variance, even though it's a one-handed weapon. So it is highly, highly unique, and it has been a best-in-slot item for the JP players for a very long time. That being said, I do believe Global will likely be getting a nerfed version. I think the one that they teased to us is weaker. Basically, in most cases, there's no simple way to describe all of the ways that Excalibur works. There are so many mechanics that are just obnoxious, and I've tried describing them in many different cuts that did not make it past the cutting room floor for this video. But in essence, Excalibur is only maybe going to be a very tiny increase in damage in some cases. Ultimately, the downfall of the variance that you gain from Excalibur is that it is only one attack, so newer trials with the reformulated damage calculation will penalize that weapon heavily, and it penalizes other parts of your attack because, you know, you have to equip a wind weapon and your total attack is lower, and all these other mechanics that go on behind the curtain. Just know that Excalibur is an acceptable weapon that you can run on Bartz, and in some very infrequent cases, it will be a very minor damage increase, but it will not be the true dual wield meta buster that it was for the Japanese version of the game. So just keep that in mind. You do want to pick up Excalibur when it comes, just in case it is something that is best in slot for your Bartz for a particular trial. That's why I trust the builder to just do it for me, because the builder will take that sort of thing into consideration, and it will tell you, yes, you should use your Excalibur, no, you should not, based on whatever fight you're plugging in there. So, you know, I'm going to pick mine up, sit on it. I might run it through Item World this coming week, but ultimately, I don't think it's like a must grab quite like it was in the Japanese version of the game. So, all of that being said, that's basically all the coverage on Bartz's builds. Now, whether or not he is worth it, you know, is his banner worth pulling for? Is he worth investing in? He absolutely is top tier right now. The only person who does better damage per turn is CG Lightning. However, he does have higher burst potential and a much more substantial sustain. Because as you saw with my Bartz build, you know, having 900 defense and spirit with over 10,000 HP and with like 3,700 attack and having those buffs be non-dispellable, that's pretty crazy. Like that is very hard to kill. There's only a few damage dealers that come to being as tanky as him, with Elena being the most prominent. So, you know, that is definitely a huge bonus for Bartz. The fact that he can just tank so much stuff, not even care, like that's awesome. I love that. The nice thing about Bartz is that he comes on a banner that has two good units on it, basically, himself and Warrior of Light Lena. Lena, of course, is a meta tier healer who brings a ton to the table. So if you're like, well, you know, what if I don't get Bartz, you know, going on the step up, or what if I don't get him pulling on tickets or whatever, you know, at least you have a shot at getting Warrior of Light Lena, who will last on your party for a real long time. She is very excellent. Now, as far as whether or not you should chase his TMR, that is totally up to you. That's going to depend on what units you have currently and what units you want down the line. Because you could say, oh, I want to invest in Hermes sandals so that I can get, you know, true dual wield equips on people down the line. That's great. Do keep in mind that you can purchase a Moogle for one Hermes sandals from the Mog shop for this event. So you do have an option to get a Hermes sandals using a Moogle Prism if you were fortunate enough to have one of those. But it is a very good TMR, and you can see a lot of use out of it. So whether or not Bartz is worth it in terms of the pot investment, or I guess kind of, you know, do you use him in your party? Do you pot him up? Do you sync Moogles into equips for him? I think he's somebody that you can use pretty much indefinitely. I've definitely seen some YouTubers clear even the most current Japanese content with CG Bartz as their main damage dealer, so it is reassuring to know that he does have a very long shelf life for a lot of trials coming down the line, in addition to just, you know, that super tankiness is so nice. One thing though that is probably not worth it for him in any case is leveling his limit burst. You really don't get anything out of that. You don't use his limit burst much, you don't get any additional benefit other than like increased damage, so skip that one if you're going to choose to run CG Bartz. Skip enhancing that limit burst. You don't need to do that. But otherwise, he is worth potting up with his HPs and MPs and defense and spirit, and because that tankiness goes a really, really long way, and he helps a lot of players who struggle with staying alive during fights. So yeah, I mean, that's about it. I think Bartz is definitely worth it for anybody who doesn't have a current top tier damage dealer. He does do even quite a lot more damage than Esther, and Esther does great damage. Like, Esther's going to be able to last you a long time still. But if you're like, oh, I lucked into a couple of Bartzes, you know, or I liked him, so I pulled for him, or I wanted the TMR and I pulled for him, whatever. Bartz is somebody that you can get a lot of value out of, and I really like him. His chaining families are super friendly to chain with, so even if you have to use him as a solo damage dealer, that's something else you can do, especially with Aloha Lastwell. BT dubs, Aloha Lastwell's got that 100% Wind Imperil available at all times, and triple casts, so he can like triple cast wind chains with Bartz, and also like provoke or do something else, you know, in the same turn. So, you know, there's a lot of cheeky stuff you can do. But anyways, I think he's worth it if you happen upon him. If you're looking for a damage dealer, he's got your back. And, you know, the banner's a good value if you don't mind pulling Warrior of Light Lena as well. So that's about my verdict on CG Bartz. That's been a complete guide of how to use him. Let me know what you think of Warrior of Light Bartz down in the comments below, and I will see everybody in the next video.